everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Where am I? I was playing around with a few things here on the screen, and it started out like I was going to do this live stream at 8 o'clock. I was waiting for my grandson to go to sleep, and my daughter decided to take him out to Target. So she's gone with him, and I figured, you know what? Now while I still have the energy, I think I'll move the live stream up. Scott Briller and Johnny Quest already hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it greatly. It's been an interesting day. Just for those, I really haven't mentioned it too much. I actually drove down south last Thursday to Savannah, and then Sunday I drove up from Savannah up to Marietta, Georgia. I have two of my daughters living in the state of Georgia right now, and my daughter is my grandson is a year and a half, and he has his train set that I got him last year, which he was terrified of, but now he is in good shape with it. So just to give you an idea of what I did today, that crackling that you're hearing are my meatballs, okay? I had them sizzling up in the pan. Hang on one second. All right, come on. Do your thing here. There you go. So I made meatballs today, and it was I do a combination of beef and pork and eggs, parsley, basil. My meatballs are pretty darn rich. Okay, I also she didn't have any. I had to use whole milk. Instead, usually I use half and half, or at times I've even had it when it's been in the house. I've used heavy cream in there, and oh God, it's unbelievable how good they come out. So that's what I did. I also, let's see if I can find the other things that I was doing today. Hang on a second. I know it does sound like bees buzzing, doesn't it? But I got a couple of other things I can show you that I was doing today. Oh, this is the most important thing. Hang on one second. So, see, it's a known fact that when kids are asleep this time of year, their grandparents create magic, and I went ahead and expanded both his train sets, his Polar Express and the Lehigh Valley set. So he's happy with his choo-choo. Okay. So again, that's been the extent of my day. On top of that, making meatballs, baked rigatoni, and a few other things. So now let's get to the weather, shall we? And we have, of course, our weather front that is moving on through here. And let me just check. I assume, by the way, there's no audio issues tonight so far. I'm hoping that that's the case. Cash 082, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it greatly. As you join Scott Briller, Steve LaPointe, thanks for hitting Super Chat. I knew I missed somebody here on the list. Scott Briller, Steve LaPointe, Johnny Quest, and Cash 082. Thanks very much. So let's get rolling here. We are seeing this system that is heading our way, this cold front. And we are going to see a change over to snow when it goes by. Chris, those of you, by the way, who are coming on now, I changed the original time from 8 o'clock to 6:45. So if you're getting your notifications late or early, it's my fault. I originally thought I was going to have to wait till 8 o'clock to do the live stream, but instead I had an opening. So we've got this cold front coming through, and there isn't a whole lot with it from the standpoint of any kind of developing storm here. That's not what we're dealing with here. We're basically dealing with what I've been describing as a flat wave, a front that is almost like a straight line, and a little wave kind of buckles along it, and that's really the extent of it. You get some overrunning precip that you deal with. Cold air comes in on the backside, and that's really, you get what you get. And sometimes you can get lucky in a situation like this. If you've got enough overrunning, you can generate a quarter to a half an inch of liquid in the cold air. Every once in a while, you get a situation where it's especially if you're deeper into the winter, where you can wind up with a bit more. This one doesn't really look especially problematic. So we have some winter weather advisories that are up, including for a few counties in northwestern Alabama. I don't know if Jess Harden is watching tonight, but we actually even have, I think we may have some special weather statements written up for North Georgia. I'll have to check that out, because it's 40 degrees outside my door right now. So I'm actually almost 20 degrees cooler than it is up back home in the New York, Long Island metro area. Winter weather advisories up the western Carolina mountains, the westernmost counties, and on into southwestern Virginia, up through Johnny Quest land, into western Maryland. Then there's a bit of a gap over New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania. I guess Mount Holly decided that it wasn't worth to put the advisories up, and then they have them up for Connecticut, the northeastern counties of New Jersey that surround New York City itself, Long Island, and Westchester County in the lower Hudson Valley. The advisories also extend into Rhode Island and into a small portion of southeastern Mass. We've got some lake effect issues around western New York, so we're seeing winter weather advisories up in north central New York, on the east shores of Ontario, and also south and west of Buffalo, and also cradling some areas up in northern Michigan on the lower peninsula and the upper peninsula. Wind chill advisories throughout Minnesota, Wisconsin, and North Dakota. And then we've got a smattering of winter storm watches up in the west as the next storm gets ready to move on in. So as far as snow amounts are concerned, I've been watching the Weather Service forecast here over the last couple of days, really kind of taking amounts down, which makes sense. And again, the flat nature of the wave, you're looking at a 1 to 3 inch snowfall, and maybe a couple of pockets get a little bit more, a couple of pockets are going to get a little bit less. It's always tricky with this sort of stuff. And where you have the lake effect happening in southwestern New York and in north central New York, probably some pockets of 4 to 6 inches up there. Coastal Maine, about an inch or so, running up the immediate coastline, and also some coating to an inch snows heading up north toward Caribou, and on up through upstate New York and northernmost New York, northern Vermont. Really, again, no big deal. But you do have some 2 to 4 inch snows for the central Appalachians, and that is something. For some areas you get far enough south, you really don't see this too often. But we even have some of the white stuff showing up on the map in northern Alabama and in parts of northwestern Mississippi. I know I've got one of my regular YouTube viewers, Brian, who's in northwestern Mississippi, was kind of hoping today that he might see a few flakes, and you may very well see something. Meanwhile, up to the north, we'll take a look across the Great Lakes, and you've got some 10 to 12 inch amounts up near Lake Superior on the upper peninsula and lower peninsula of Michigan there. And of course, extending out to the west across Wisconsin and through Minnesota, looks like generally a 2 to 5 inch snowfall in most places, and the amounts kind of tail off a bit as you head into Montana, and then they go crazy in the northern Rockies with the next weather system moving in there with some 20 inch plus amounts being forecast, and on up into the Pacific Northwest inland up the mountains where we're in the Cascades, where we're seeing snowfalls of, I don't know what the spots are specifically, but 53 and 73 inches. That's pretty impressive. And some of that even extends down into Northern California. So right now it's waiting for the wind shift. I mean, that really is the wind shift and the colder air. You'll notice that these are 6 o'clock temperatures, which are in the low and mid 50s along the coast. But we're already seeing lower temperatures not that far away. We are looking at northwest winds. Albany's down now to 39. So it looks like the frontal boundary's just about here, getting ready to move. Must have just moved through Baltimore and Washington with the northwest winds. You go back into western New York, western Pennsylvania. This is about where the 32 degree line shows up, and your temperatures there already in the 20s. So there's a fairly tight temperature pressure gradient from mid 50s along the immediate coast to upper 20s when you go back over into western PA. So that cold air is going to eventually get into the east, into the coastal areas. And of course, in a situation like this, it's always about timing with respect to the cold air and the precip that's around. You're looking at 30s. Actually, the cold air is doing a pretty good job of making its way southward through West Virginia. We're down below freezing in many areas. In eastern Tennessee, we're in the low 30s. And here we are in North Georgia. So Atlanta, this is at the airport. They're 45. I'm north and west of the airport near Marietta, and I can tell you right now it's every bit of 40 out there. Okay, that's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport at 45. Let me go a little bit further to the north. What's that, 39? That's Cartersville Airport at 39. 41 at Canton Cherokee Airport, and then you go a little bit further north to Dalton, where it's 37. And Chattanooga is 36. So there is colder air that's seeping southward down to 32 in Decatur, Alabama, west of Huntsville. So that cold air is having an effect and pushing southward. So it's really a matter of the precip. How much precip are we going to have left for that cold air to work on? And here's our surface map from 4 o'clock this afternoon. The front approaching the coastline. It's already well past into central North and South Carolina, swinging down into southern Georgia to the Florida Panhandle and south of New Orleans. And there's your cold high. And it is cold, by the way. When you look at some of these temperatures at 4 o'clock this afternoon across Minnesota, you're in the single digits and below zero. So this is a pretty decent shot of cold air that is pushing eastward. And that's why I think, when you compare this to some of what we were dealing with a couple of weeks ago, just the adjustment of normal being 5 to 7 degrees colder now than we were, say, a couple of weeks ago, just to seasonally adjust things. This air mass is enough to change it over to snow and create some accumulation issues in the morning. Meanwhile, you're still seeing this southwest flow. And again, notice that it's kind of like this parallelogram shape, or a sideways a rectangle, I guess you want to describe it that way. That might work. But if you look at the structure of the clouds, it's kind of in this sideways box. And that's telling you that it's a flat wave, okay? That really is what it boils down to. It's just a very, very flat system. You're not seeing that rotation of the cloud cover into a circulation, that comma-shaped signature on the satellite. You're really not seeing that. So what you're hoping for, if you're a snow lover, is that if you get a good, decent shot of precip here, that it holds together as it runs along to the northeast, while colder air is coming in on the backside of the front on north to northeast winds. You got a southwest flow aloft, you got a cold northerly to northeasterly flow at the surface, and that creates some pretty decent overrunning. And again, there are times when you can do really well with that, and then there are other times when you don't do well with it. The radar is actually not half bad tonight. When I take a look at this, just update it and refresh it. You do have, as each one of these waves, you'll notice that there's these little gaps in between. So what happens is, as each one of these little waves goes, a precip goes by, it just essentially nudges the front a little bit further to the east. So the next wave is about to move through eastern Pennsylvania and into southeastern New York, into New Jersey. And the precip also extends back through West Virginia into Kentucky and Tennessee, northern Mississippi. Probably starting to see a changeover to snow on the northern end of this. I'll have to pull up a few observations to see whether that is the case. As of the 6 o'clock plot, I really didn't see much, but why don't we just take a look. Let's go down into northern Alabama just to pull up their surface observations and see what they got. So Muscle Shoals and Huntsville, Haleyville, all having light snow right now. So 1 mile visibility at Huntsville. So there, the snow's falling at a decent clip. It's also 31 there, so it is accumulating. So I bet you Jess is watching to see all this. Let's see if we can get some numbers up in northern Mississippi, northwest Mississippi, see what's going on there, and pull up some of their observations. And oh, it's got the map. Oh, this is such a pain in the neck. You got the EDD. All right, you know what? I'm just gonna have to come back to this. I will just, for laughs, take a look in Georgia. Let me go back. Hang on. This is Memphis. Let's take a look. Let's go to Central Tennessee, and hopefully it will give us the, let's see, detailed observations. No, it's the EDD. I don't want that. Surface observations. Let's try that one. Nope, that's the EDD. How many different setups of the EDD do these sites have, for God's sake? I just want the written obs. Regional weather roundup. There you go. Okay. Crossville has light snow, and that's about it. Lovely. Oh boy. I'll try it. Let me see if I missed that choice here. No, they got to make things difficult here. All right. You know what? You get the idea. There's some snow there on the radar. Okay. And that's moving northeastward. You actually have some pretty hefty precip up in northeast Louisiana, too. Looks like some heavy rain and maybe even a thunderstorm there in the mix. Some showers in the southeast through central Georgia and western South Carolina. So that's kind of where that frontal boundary is. And out in the west, we've got precip coming into the west coast from northern California all the way up to northwestern Washington state. So this is part of the next storm system that is moving inland. So let's jump back to the east. Let's take a look at, I'm going to take a look at what some of the Weather Service offices are forecasting here. Now this is for central Pennsylvania, north to south. So we've been watching these numbers come down over the last couple of days. And the Weather Service only going for less than an inch south of Route 80. North of Route 80, it's got next to nothing. A few spots less than an inch, but otherwise you got a lot of goose eggs showing up in a few places. So that is that's again the expected snowfall from State College, PA. That's their forecast. Now, I haven't really seen too much change here on Mount Holly's map. 1 to 2 inches seems to be their forecast, except they've got less than an inch around Allentown and less than an inch in southwest Jersey down into Delaware. In New York, in Upton, they've been the most aggressive of the bunch, and they've been coming down on the northern end of this too. So 1 to 2, 2 to 3 inches. I've kind of went with this general zone of 1 to perhaps some pockets of 2 or 3 in some places. And there are going to be some areas, there's going to be a lot of variability. Some areas are going to get very little. Others are going to finish more toward the high end. And I would suspect that you would probably see more of the snow accumulating on colder surfaces as opposed to roadways, unless it snows hard enough to bring that surface temperature down to about 32 or 33, 31, 32, 33. Intensity trumps everything. You can sit here all day long and talk about warm ground and sun angle and all the rest of it. If it's snowing hard enough, all of that really doesn't matter. So if you're snowing at moderate to heavy snow, 1 to 2 inches an hour or more, which it's not going to happen that hard, but I'm just saying as an example, when it's snowing that hard, I really don't care if the temperature's at 34 or 5. It's actually going to stick on, for the most part, it will stick on main roadways if it's snowing that heavily. It just, what basically winds up happening is it just can't melt fast enough, and the snow just accumulates. So again, I'm thinking 1 to 3. Boston has been coming down a lot. They started out with numbers in the 4 to 6 range in Western Mass and in Northwestern Connecticut. I mean, they've really cut that back by 2/3, only going for an inch or two, maybe a bit more as you go south and east in the southeastern Mass around Plymouth and New Bedford at 3 to 4. Tough call here. This is going to be one of those situations where they're going to just have to watch the the observations on an hour-by-hour basis and see how it plays out. So GFS tonight, kind of been consistent with what it's been doing over the last couple of days, where you've got, this flat front comes through with this wave, and you see it produces an uneven area of snow. Those darker blue pockets are supposed to represent heavy snow on the radar. If somebody gets into them, fine and dandy. If you don't, you won't get much. And notice, by the way, the northern fringe of this really cuts off sharply. I mean, I don't. I wonder the area that's showing up north of I-90, if that ever even reaches the ground in upstate New York. But it's more going to be more to the south, I believe. And I also think that there might be a chance for a little accumulation in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area out of this. And then it goes out. Here comes that really cold high, and there's no blocking. So as soon as it comes in, this is Thursday afternoon, it goes racing eastward rapidly, and that's going to allow the next system in the southern stream to get going here in the Gulf of Mexico, right in here. And your high is going out, so there's no block. This thing is going to wind up going probably up the coast, either along or just inland of the coast, or just to the right of the coast. And here on this particular run of the GFS, you got a pretty solid area of rain here for Friday that starts in the southeast, and by Friday evening, it's got rain up to just north of New York City with east to southeast isobars. We get into some fairly decent wind here, I think, Friday night in the area from southern New England down to the Delmarva Peninsula, with that low sitting right over Cape Hatteras, and then southeast of Atlantic City by Saturday morning. Looks like a pretty decent band of rain that comes through during the overnight Friday night into Saturday morning. That storm lifts up to the northeast, and you notice, by the way, there's hardly any frozen precip anywhere. It's rain all the way up, and it makes sense. There's no block really to hold that cold high and that cold air in, but there is cold air coming back, and it's right back through here. There's another cold front that's moving east, so that's got a pretty decent cold high that's dropping down into the Dakotas, and that will eventually make its way into the Northeast come Sunday and on Monday. Now, I'm going to go back one model run, and then we're going to take a look at the upper air, because we do see some hints of things happening in the longer range. I talked about it yesterday. It shows up again today, where on the 12Z run of the GFS and the European as well, taking a low across Kentucky, trying to run it up into Ohio, and there it goes to the northeast with some snow at the start that changes over to rain. The European, I believe, was a bit, well, I gotta go look at it. A lot of this stuff, I'm just kind of looking at it for the first time. And then there's another system that it's trying to set up for the long range going in before Christmas. That would be pretty interesting if that winds up happening. But I've been noticing, at least on the upper air, that there has been some blockiness that has been showing up, and that it comes and goes on different model runs, but I have noticed it there more, not a whole lot of blocking, but maybe enough that we wind up with something. Now, as far as early next week is concerned, the European has a much more bullish view here, where it's got the low in eastern Tennessee, and it redevelops it along the Virginia coast, and it would at least imply that there's enough cold air around that we would see some snow across the northeast and even down into the northern mid-Atlantic states. The GFS wants to take the low, the primary, pretty far out to the west. So we'll see how these model runs go from here. But I want to punch up the upper air. And you'll notice here, at least by Monday, that you do have higher than normal heights and pressures across Greenland and through the polar regions and back up through Alaska. So you are seeing a bit more of a blocky look, where the jet is starting to show a little bit more displacement to the south going into next week. And that actually holds up in the longer range on the European model. Let's take a look at the GFS to see if it does the same thing. Hang on one second here, folks. I'm going to take the GFS out. Now the GFS, all right, so we're starting here with the initial. So I'm looking at the new run. So we're going through the middle of this week. There's your trough and system for the weekend. And again, there's no blocking here. If you notice here by Friday night, you have nothing but lower than normal pressures up. This is the region where you want to see higher than normal pressures, somewhere up here, okay? And you want to see lower than normal pressures down in this area. And you've got the reverse for the most part. So that is the reason why that cold high just goes out, and then you've got this trough that's lifting up with that storm that's going to go straight north, either right along the coast or just barely offshore or inland. That trough goes out. You start to see the GFS actually trying to build higher than normal pressures and heights up in the polar region. So you start to see displacement here of systems further south. The only thing I'm noticing here on the GFS versus the European is that it seems to want to bring this trough pretty strongly down into to our west, west of 90 degrees west, and it sharpens that trough pretty far to the west. That may be incorrect. It also is interesting to me to see that at least there's got this nice system out in the North Atlantic, northwest of the Azores. So that at least is, again, you're displacing that jet further south than you otherwise would, and you've got higher than normal pressures up in this region. So that is something that snow lovers would want to see. And even though, at least from the standpoint of the surface, I'm just trying to run this through to the end of the time frame, it kind of It looks like it's trying to do something here in the longer term with some blockiness developing there over Greenland and points to the east. That's actually quite a blocky look to the overall pattern by the time we get to the day after Christmas. I said yesterday that I think at some point something is going to happen between now and Christmas, aside from whatever happens tomorrow, and I'm going to stick with it. I think there's enough here on the models to suggest that something may try to happen between now and Christmas Day. And if you want to maybe give me a little bit of room to maneuver, we could carry that to maybe to New Year's. I think the pattern is at least it's not unfavorable. Let's put it that way. I think there's enough there that you can make a decent case for something to occur. So that snow lovers can get their white Christmas. Let's see. Elizabeth Harrison is on board tonight. Nice to see you here. And we've got New York Jets fan Weather Cody. Was hoping next week we would get some snow here in New Jersey, but here we go again. Yeah, try not to. I haven't said this in a while, but try not to focus on each model run's adventure that it takes you on, because you will drive yourself emotionally crazy. Try to pay more attention to the upper air, and then we let the pieces play out. If you think back to about a week or so ago, was really, I don't think the models envisioned what's happening for tomorrow, even though it's a minor event. I don't believe if you go back a week or 10 days ago, you would have seen much indication of this. So I sense always the frustration in someone saying that, well, the models, you're saying this, but the model is not showing that. Well, the model needs to come, and I try to tell the young forecasters, you want the models to come to you. You don't want to go to them, okay? So you want to be able to figure out what's happening weather-wise in the atmosphere and have the models verify your view and have them eventually come to your line of thinking. That's telling you that you're actually looking at weather and looking at the atmosphere in a much more effective way than just picking one model run. Because once the model run is done, what are you looking at then? If that's all you're doing, then what are you looking at then? Then you're just looking at, okay, well, where's the next model run? It's you're kind of like, I don't know, you're just kind of, I'm trying to figure out a good way to describe it, but in a way, it's sort of like you've just gotten your fix and now you're waiting to get. As soon as it's over with, you have to wait for the next one, and your inevitable disappointment that is going to occur. Joe Maiano, 50-50 low shows back up and higher than normal pressures to the north. I agree, and that's, that is to me, that's the most important takeaway. Let the other things will come together on their own, but if you've got those pieces, the higher than normal pressures, I don't even think you necessarily have to have the 50-50 low there, but if you've got the higher than normal pressures up in the polar regions, that gives you something to work with. And oftentimes when we're dealing with a situation like that where the NAO goes negative, we know and have seen in the past how unstable models can get in that type of situation. I'm just going to pull up the Teleconnections. I didn't see the updated version today. Oh, that's pretty interesting. This was off the 0Z run. Now, you've got the NAO actually going from off the wall positive to neutral pretty rapidly around the 18th. So you know what? That's a signal, in my view, that would be a signal that something may try to happen around that time frame. So here it is on the screen here for you. So take a look at this big drop right here. See that? It's kind of silly to do it in red, Joe. Let's go to blue. Okay, but here's your actually, you know what? I better not even do that. Let me erase it. Let's do the black. It probably will show up better since I have blue on this map too. But see this big fall? So it's telling you that pressures are rising rapidly across the North Atlantic starting from the 13th, and it crashes to the neutral zone around the 18th. So that is probably where you want to look for something to happen. The PNA, the Pacific North America Index, goes from ridge in the west, trough in the east. It's a little more complicated than that, but sort of like that. And that gets down to near neutral, goes slightly negative, then kind of goes slightly positive, and then goes somewhat negative here toward the end of the period. And actually, that might not necessarily be a bad thing from the standpoint of a surface track, because if the ridge is too strong out in the west, you can always make the argument that if the other things aren't in play, that you wind up with a coast hugger. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. The EPO, this is a new one. The EPO, which is negative, barely negative now, actually goes rather strongly positive around the 18th. Right around the time that the NAO is crashing. So, ideally, we would like the EPO to be negative. I've said many times that, with the NAO is something that I've always viewed as being somewhat overstated in terms of its value. But it's also quite elusive. It comes and goes very quickly. We saw what happened just recently. With the storm from last weekend, we went strongly negative for a handful of days, and then as soon as it was done, it pulled out quickly, and suddenly we had this super positive North Atlantic oscillation, progressive as you can get, everything moving quickly from west to east and nothing holding on as far as cold air is concerned. So the EPO, if the NAO can go negative, then that might help to compensate for the positive EPO, which would argue that you would have warmer air trying to come in to the eastern part of the United States. It's a snapshot view. Always remember when you look at these teleconnections, they're based on the model run that they're built on. So when that model changes, if you see, if you don't have blocking on one run and you do have blocking on the other, you're going to have a negative and a positive NAO on one run, and then maybe the very next run after that for the same time frame, you could have a strongly negative NAO. So they're just snapshots of what the models are showing. Hey, Chuck Cardillo, I saw you mentioned before that you were snowing. You were snowing up, and you're up at close to 3,000 feet up. So and you're in the Catskills, so you should be snowing. You're snowing there all the time. David Schwartz, yes. If you haven't already, go to Joe Rayo's weather YouTube channel, Joe Rayo Weather, and be sure you subscribe to his YouTube channel. Okay, it's for free. You've got a Gmail address. You guys know it. You're subscribed to my channel, so go ahead and subscribe to his channel too. So this way, when we're not doing it together, which is going to be more often than not, You can go ahead and watch him, and then when he's done, come back and watch me. Or if I go first, you watch me, and then you can go ahead and watch him. I think he went earlier than me today, so he went first, and I don't see him on the message board, so I don't think he's trying to get a hold of me. The HRRR for tonight's snow is a general 1 to 3 inches, says Steve LaPointe. Well, let me take a look. When I was looking at it earlier today, I wasn't really overly enthused by it. So let's see if it's kind of, the HRRR model. I probably should look at it every day, if only so that I could get a sense of consistency, because it just really does not work well. But I'm looking at it here. I mean, it's got a stripe of snow for tomorrow. It actually gets it in a little bit earlier to New York City, down to Philadelphia, changes it over by about 2 or 3 a.m. It's got this narrow stripe of snow, and it would argue that at least for Long Island and southeastern New England would stay in snow for a bit longer than some of the other places, certainly to the west. And it would have more snow as you go north and east of New York City than you would to the south and west. It's kind of like what the other models are doing to a certain extent. I think we're at the point here, as we always get to this point, where you just got to look at the obs. You just got to look at the observations when they happen, watch the radar, take a look at the satellites, see where the higher cloud tops are and how it's all behaving. I don't think you're going to get too much of a revelation from those things until probably during the early morning hours when you're all asleep. So just hope that when you wake up tomorrow morning, for you snow lovers, that it is snowing in your particular area. So let's see. Jason Schaefer, I'm sorry to hear that your mom's not doing well. So our thoughts are with you, and PM me, okay? We'll talk some more. Supposedly the HRRR V4 parallel is going better than the HRRR V3 operational. Okay, Timothy. One of the funny things about, it's like they're forever trying to come up with that magic model bullet, and it gets. So now there's another thing for me to look at. I am a strong proponent. By the way, I'm a strong proponent, and I've said this before. If you're really wrapped up in weather and what's going on, you don't need to look at more than a couple of models. You really don't. You should be able to do it without it. If you're not able to do it, unless you've got the model in front, a model in front of you, and you're constantly jumping from one to the other. You really need to take a step back. I think you're doing something wrong as a forecaster. You need to get really into what is actually happening. And I think Joe Rayo and I have talked about this many times, because we came from an era where you had to hand plot a lot of your stuff. So by doing that, you really knew. I mean, you really kind of got a really good feel over what was going on and how it was happening. And it gave you a leg up forecast-wise. You rely too much on models. You sort of, in a sense, what you're doing is you're forgetting to look out the window. And if you're in the world of weather and you're not looking out the window, you've got a problem. And Scott Briller, 1 inch in Rochester on the grass. You're relocating. That's it. Yes. Little bit of a wind off the lake there, and it just turns right on. You actually shouldn't do too badly from the standpoint of some snowfall up there while you are there. I think you probably do better up there than you will downstate for tomorrow. Okay, so you know what? It's coming up on 7:25. Let's put an end to the live stream tonight. Appreciate everybody being here, and we will, of course, be back tomorrow. We'll see what happens tomorrow morning. I'll probably get up early and take a look at what's happening. And for my Patreon members, you got your extra stuff today. You'll get the extra stuff tomorrow, and we'll look at things tomorrow morning. Maybe I'll do weather in 10 tomorrow morning before I do weather in 5, just to cover what is happening. Philip Neary, Joe, the H drops, the HR, the high resolution RGEM. Why doesn't this get traction? I've been monitoring and it's pretty good. Actually, the H, it does. I look at it from time to time. And the times I've looked at it, it's actually done fairly well. It's not it's part of the RGEM family, and the RGEM, the regional Canadian model, is the short range model actually does well sometimes, and I've used it from time to time successfully. The H drops tonight. You know what it is? It's how many models do you look at over time? I mean, eventually you're going to have to make a forecast. Looking at the H drops, it actually does have a fairly impressive, couple of solid bursts of snow going on for tomorrow morning, starting at about 5 a.m. across Long Island and New Jersey, and continuing up until about noon or so before it finally pulls out. So it does generate a bit more. Just want to see what it gives in precip. It's a little deceptive here because I've got still some stuff left over that's going on tonight. So I can't really see. I mean, it gives a half to 3/4 of an inch. So if you want to cut it in half, it would be half of that would be snow, at least according to the the H drops is what I call it. So yeah, definitely, I think it's definitely worth looking at. Okay, that's it. Saying goodnight here. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Thanks to those of you who hit Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate that greatly. We'll have our regular live stream schedule up for tomorrow. So have a good evening. Stay safe. We'll see you then.